So I started the Safe Banking Act, or I don't know what we called it back then, about 6 years ago, and have been working on it ever since. And now it's actually starting to move. When I first started it, and you know, you all can relate to this a little bit, I brought it up, and the chairman of the committee was a guy, a Republican named Jeb Hencherly, and he just wouldn't let me have a hearing, wouldn't let the bill come up for a vote, nothing. But I would bring it up whenever I had a chance to speak, and they all sort of chuckled when, you know, I bring up anything related to marijuana. You know, oh yeah, Rocky Mountain High, all that sort of stuff. Well, after a while, they stopped chuckling and they realized I was serious and that this was a serious issue because so much cash is created and the potential for somebody getting harmed is real. And in fact, we've had a murder, we've had robberies, we've had all that stuff. So there was a real public safety aspect to this that everybody began to take seriously. And this year, when Democrats won the House, the chairwoman of the committee, Maxine Waters from California, allowed me to have a hearing. We had people from all over the country testified, minority cannabis businesses, state treasurers, law enforcement, the whole range. It was really a great panel, and I think I started winning some real converts, particularly among the Republicans, to move this piece of legislation forward.
Through the testimony?
Through the testimony, it was excellent. Everybody had prepared well, and you know, I mean, because it makes sense. I mean, they're just, so the California treasurer talk about people coming in with bags, suitcases full of cash. We had this little town of Desert Hot Springs right near Palm Springs, where they have some dispensaries who came in to pay their local taxes, 2 suitcases full of cash. Took them 3 days to count it. But, you know, they paid their taxes, and the city counted it, and it was a big piece of revenue for that little town.
And so where is it at right now? It's out of committee, correct?
So, like I said, I hadn't had a hearing or a markup. So markup is the amending of the bill or the voting on the bill in 6 years. So we had the panel. It was an outstanding bunch that testified. We had the markup. A lot of amendments were thrown at me, a lot of things. But at the end of the day, it was a bipartisan vote. It was 45 to 15, 34 Democrats and 11 Republicans against 50 Republicans. And the Republican leadership in that committee was like, they couldn't believe that 11 Republicans would support this thing. Every single Democrat voted for it, but it's a bipartisan piece of legislation. So my chief sponsors with me are a guy named Denny Heck from Olympia, Washington. So Washington, obviously, very, very involved in this subject. And 2 Republicans, Denny's a Democrat, 2 Republicans from Ohio, Warren Davidson and a guy named Steve Stivers. And Warren, so Denny's coming at it from a public safety point of view. Warren is coming at it kind of from a libertarian point of view, like, okay, just let them do their business. And then Stivers, coming at it from a slightly different point of view, he has Scott's Liquid Gold or Scott's Miracle Grow or whatever the hell it is in his district, which the marijuana business, the cannabis industry, is a big customer. And so from a business perspective, one of the major employers, that's sort of where he started to pursue it. We're now at 206 co-sponsors. We think we could get upwards of, you know, I shouldn't say this, but I'm hoping for somewhere between 250 and 300 votes. You got to get 218 to pass the House of Representatives and to send it on to the Senate. So I think we're going to be at 250 to 300, you know, about 3/4, 2/3 will be Democrats, 1/3 Republican, but, you know, we have a lot of stalemates, if you will, in the Congress where there's not that kind of bipartisan support. But this has gotten that kind of bipartisan support. And then if we're lucky, or no, if we do our job, it goes to the Senate. There are 32 co-sponsors. The primary sponsors are Jeff Merkley, Senator from Oregon, and Cory Gardner from here.
Hey everyone, my name is Mike Hayes here in Colorado, the home of legalization, and on my channel here we do news, commentary, and interviews from around the cannabis industry. So this clip was from an interview I did with Congressman Ed Perlmutter, who represents Arvada, a suburb of Denver. He's also the primary sponsor of the Safe Banking Act, and he's put in most of the work to write it. I wanted to bring this clip back because this week the Safe Banking Act is back in the news because it's been introduced in the U.S. Senate. And after Democrats took control of the chamber, it might actually get a vote this year. So looking back at that conversation, I want to do a little analysis now. The real question that we're all wondering is, will the Safe Banking Act pass Congress? Of course, this Safe Banking Act would allow the cannabis industry to act like regular businesses, hold bank accounts, not have to jump through a bunch of hoops that they currently have to. It also opens up the possibility that they could work with larger banks, possibly go public. That probably would take a little bit more legislation. But now it's time to kind of ask again, same as he was saying in 2019 that he was crossing his fingers, this might get done. Now it's 2021. What are the odds? So the first way to address that question is, well, there's certainly a larger chance of it getting passed now than when Mitch McConnell was in charge. Mitch McConnell just killed any bills that he didn't want to put his Republican colleagues through. If they didn't want to vote against an unpopular idea, Mitch McConnell would just kill the bill before it even got to a vote. He would take all the heat, and everyone else would be able to say, I would have supported that, I just didn't get the chance. So now with Democrats in charge, does that seem more likely? My analysis would say probably no. And I'll tell you why. First, we have serious opposition from Republicans. I was just reading an article about the Safe Banking Act being introduced back when Congressman Perlmutter was talking about it. Mike Crapo was the senator on the Republican side from Idaho, and he was the chairman of the committee, the banking committee in the Senate, that would have had to approve Congressman Perlmutter's bill to get it through the Senate. At that time, Senator Crapo, and I doubt he's changed his position much, said that he could be open to bringing this bill into his committee hearing, but to do so, he would need to see in that bill a change made that the only cannabis businesses that could get access to banking services were those that only dealt in THC products of 2% or lower. So to put that into context, hemp right now is capped at 1%. So it would only be twice the THC of hemp, right? So we'd have us smoking hemp out here in America. Most flower in legal states is around that 20% range, pushing towards 30 sometimes. And then concentrates, of course, are up in the 50, 60, even up to 80% THC concentration. So the Republican side is starting the negotiations at, well, we want to drop all that down to 2%, essentially just killing the THC market entirely. So the industry wouldn't even want to see that bill passed, right? We would rather jump through all the hoops to make banking work without this legislation than to pass legislation that opens up banking but caps us at 2% THC. So that's where the Republicans are at, right? So that's number one. The Republicans are going to continue to be ingrained in their very old-fashioned thinking around this issue. Now, Republican voters, it's become pretty bipartisan. A lot of Republican voters are on board with cannabis being legalized. Unfortunately, the representatives that they elect are very much not in agreement with them on that. So on the Republican side, we have that issue. And of course, the filibuster would give Republicans an outside amount of control on what passes the Senate. We won't dive all into what the filibuster means and whether or not we're going to get rid of it or modify it in the Senate. But as it currently stands in the Senate, the Republicans could easily kill it, and the odds of getting 60 votes, which would mean 10 Republicans coming on board to overrule their own party on this issue of cannabis banking, seems extremely unlikely. So that's the first problem. But then let's say that could happen, right? Or let's say the Democrats wanted to really force the issue. They wanted to maybe modify the filibuster so they could get it passed with 51 votes or something like that. Well, this is really interesting to me. I think there's a serious strategic question at play for the Democrats. Should they bring up this standalone bill that only helps the cannabis industries in legal states and helps the business interests, but does nothing else? Should they open up this bill and bring it up to a vote, have it be an up or down vote where they can put pressure on the Republicans and maybe get this passed? Well, arguably no, that would not be a good strategic decision. And I'll tell you why. Democrats right now are promising to pass comprehensive cannabis reform in the next year or two, right? That means legalizing cannabis at the federal level across all of the states. Obviously, some states could keep it illegal through their state laws, but they would get rid of that federal prohibition. Democrats are talking very seriously about, while they're doing that, they're trying to right the wrongs of the drug war. So they're trying to expunge records for federal offenses that were nonviolent, probably, but they're trying to right those wrongs and take the burden off of people who suffered underneath the drug war, right? So progressive Democrats are pushing for expungement, freeing any cannabis prisoners that are still in federal custody. And there's also the piece of social equity programs that you're seeing piecemeal in different states. A lot of progressive Democrats and the Democratic Party is trying to do this while they're legalizing. And there's a strategic advantage to that, right? These social equity programs could be popular or unpopular among the voters, but legalization is overwhelmingly popular. So if you're going to pass legalization, if you put these kind of extra measures in there instead of voting on them one by one, you're able to get lots of things done all at once. And of course, while they're doing this comprehensive reform, they're also going to be opening up this door to the business banking sector. Once that federal prohibition goes away, cannabis businesses will no longer be hamstrung by by the things the Safe Banking Act is trying to fix. So they'll have access to banking. They'll also get rid of the 280E burden that sits on the tax affairs of all cannabis businesses at this point, right? So that is what Democrats are trying to do: comprehensive reform that takes care of all of that in one fell swoop. And it's also overwhelmingly popular, right? One thing about voting in a legislature is that you have to take popular things and unpopular things and kind of popular things, and oftentimes you have to bundle them all up together because if you do them one at a time, they become much more contentious, right? So people will vote for legalization but against the banking piece, and for the social equity piece if they're this, but they might not want to help businesses if they're more progressive, stuff like that, right? So an important part of writing legislation is trying to get the right amount of laws, or the right amount of provisions in a law so that you can get people to vote from all across the spectrum. So from Democrats' perspective, if they put this Safe Banking Act on the Senate floor, possibly Republicans would oppose it in general, right? But there are probably Republicans out there who are hearing from business interests in their state, if there's legal businesses in places where they might have a medical market, like Missouri or I believe Arkansas now, these kind of conservative areas. These Republican senators are probably hearing some pressure from these businesses that are saying, hey, our state legalized medical marijuana and now we have a business, but the banking is all messed up. So from a Democrat's strategic standpoint, they're going to say, well, if you want to help the businesses in your state, you need to help us legalize on a federal level. We're not going to let you have an easy vote where you can help out your business buddies and help out the industry and help out your banking buddies. And meanwhile, 2 months later, when we put up full legalization, you strike that down, right? So they're going to try to bundle these things together so that they can go to the Republicans and say, look, we know you're not thrilled about federal legalization and you might not really care about these prisoners that we're trying to free, but you know that you want this business-friendly aspect of it, and you're getting pressure from these business interests in your districts and in your states. So vote for our comprehensive bill. It'll make your business buddies happy. It'll make our friends in the social justice and the equity movement happy. And this is a way we can come together and compromise and get all of what we want done at the same time. So that's kind of what I expect to see with regard to this Safe Banking Act. I think it's a little performative. They're going to bring it to the Senate. They're going to talk about it. They're going to have hearings about it, maybe. But at the end of the day, the Democrats are pretty single-minded that this is the time, with both houses of Congress and the presidency under their control, they're driving all the way towards legalization. And I don't think they're going to do it just with safe banking alone. I think they want to do it all at once. And they're going to want to put pressure on those Republicans to say, you better come on board because this is a popular issue. It's bipartisan among the voters. And we need to take care of it across the board and put this issue to rest at the federal level once and for all. And we're going to be following along as they do that. So thanks very much for listening. Again, I'm Mike Hayes here in Colorado. Subscribe below or like the video if you think it's interesting. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.